They sold out arenas. Children wore their faces on t-shirts. They headlined WrestleMania and signed autographs until their hands gave out. To the world watching at home, they were untouchable. Behind the pyrotechnics, behind the championship gold, some of these legends were fighting a battle that no storyline could have prepared them for, and one that had nothing to do with the person across the ring. This is the story of 8 WWE legends whose lives were permanently altered by an HIV diagnosis. Every name on this list is real. Every story matters. HIV is not the death sentence it was once considered. Since the 1980s, antiretroviral therapy has transformed it into a manageable chronic condition. People diagnosed today can live full lives. Stigma has proven far more stubborn than the virus itself. Professional wrestling was built on projecting invincibility. In that culture, admitting vulnerability was understood as career suicide. You didn't show weakness, you taped up whatever was broken and performed, which is why these stories took years, and in some cases decades, to surface. Number 1. Rick Rude. Richard Irwin Rude, known to wrestling audiences as Ravishing Rick Rude, was among the most complete performers of his generation. He could work technical matches, brawl, and cut a promo with equal effectiveness. From the late 1980s through the mid-1990s, he was one of the most recognizable heels in the business. Behind the performance, Rude was carrying something the cameras never captured. Accounts from within the wrestling community have long connected him to health struggles beyond the routine, physical toll of the business. The locker room culture of that era was saturated with steroid use, and shared needles were a consequence no one was publicly acknowledging. Blood-to-blood exposure was constant in an industry where intentional blading was standard practice and medical oversight was virtually non-existent. Rick Rude died on April 20th, 1999. He was 40 years old. The official cause was listed as heart failure. Those close to him have spoken over the years about a body compromised long before that final day. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame posthumously in 2017, 18 years after his death. Number 2. Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson is widely credited with conceiving the Royal Rumble format. 30 men, 1 ring, new entrants every 90 seconds. He was also the first ever Intercontinental Champion, a 2-time Tag Team Champion, and for the better part of 2 decades, Vince McMahon's most trusted creative advisor. He was also a gay man, navigating an industry that was, for most of his career, openly hostile to that reality. Patterson lived much of his private life behind closed doors, not by choice, but by necessity. The wrestling business of the 1970s and 1980s was not a place where being openly gay was professionally survivable. He adapted. He endured. In his later years, those close to him came to know that Patterson had contracted HIV. He managed his diagnosis privately in an era when the virus still carried enormous social stigma. Pat Patterson passed away on December 2nd, 2020, at the age of 79. Tributes came from legends across every generation. The full account of a man who gave everything to this business while privately carrying that weight deserves to be told honestly. Number 3. Johnny Rodz. In the territory era, Johnny Rodz was what the industry called a journeyman. A veteran whose value wasn't measured in championship reigns, but in the quality of work he delivered night after night. He made opponents look credible. He made finishers look lethal. His contribution extended well beyond his own career. His wrestling school in Brooklyn, the Unpredictable School of Wrestling, produced Tommy Dreamer, Bubba Ray Dudley, Devon Dudley, and Taz, among others. Rodz was among the veterans of his generation who contracted HIV during an era when blood was not just present in professional wrestling, it was treated as a storytelling tool. Blading was standard procedure. Locker rooms where equipment was shared without precaution created conditions for transmission that were catastrophic and almost entirely ignored. Rodz survived. He kept teaching. His story is a record of dangers that extended far beyond torn muscles and broken bones. Number 4. Mario Mancini. Mario Mancini was an enhancement performer, in wrestling parlance, a jobber. He appeared week after week on WWF television, stepping into the ring against featured attractions and absorbing defeats with consistency and professionalism. He made stars look devastating. He gave audiences a reason to believe in the people they were supposed to cheer. It is thankless work, and it requires genuine skill. His story forces a specific confrontation. The HIV crisis in professional wrestling was not confined to the main event. It reached every level of the locker room, because the conditions that enabled transmission were everywhere. Shared razor blades, needles that circulated freely in an era of rampant, unregulated steroid use. A complete absence of medical infrastructure. No wellness program. No testing, no safety net. The performers at the top of the card had resources, money, legal representation, leverage. The Mario Mancinis of the industry had none of that. His story is a window into the part of wrestling history the industry would prefer to leave unexamined. Number 5. Sean O'Haire. Sean O'Haire arrived in professional wrestling with every physical attribute the business prizes. 6'5", 250 pounds, an athlete who moved with fluidity that had no business belonging to a man his size. The camera found him naturally. When WWE debuted his Devil's Advocate character in 2003, a series of vignettes in which O'Haire addressed the camera with unsettling calm, speaking to suppressed desires and unspoken social hypocrisies, it felt like something genuinely original. The character had real potential. The push never materialized. Outside the ring, O'Haire's life deteriorated. Substance abuse, legal problems, a descent that accelerated after his WWE release. Reports within the wrestling community indicate that his health was further affected by an HIV diagnosis in the years following his departure from the company. Sean O'Haire was found dead in his home in Pauline, South Carolina on September 8, 2014. He was 43 years old. Number 6. A generation without a safety net. The 6th chapter does not belong to a single individual. It belongs to a generation. In the 1980s and 1990s, professional wrestling was transforming from regional territory promotions into a nationally televised entertainment industry. Audiences were growing, revenue was expanding, and in locker rooms across the country, a largely unacknowledged health crisis was building. Multiple wrestlers from this era have been identified in medical and community health reporting as part of HIV clusters, groups connected by shared environments and shared practices. Some names are known within the industry. Most have not been publicly confirmed, protected by medical privacy law and the personal decisions of those involved. The conditions that enabled transmission were not secret. They were ignored. Blading with shared equipment. Widespread, unmonitored needle use. A culture so committed to projecting toughness that seeking medical care for any reason was framed as weakness. These were not isolated incidents. They were predictable outcomes of an industry that deliberately classified its performers as independent contractors to avoid the legal obligations that employment status would have triggered. No health coverage, no safety protocols, no institutional protection of any kind. Number 7. Sherri Martel. Sherri Martel was one of the most complete performers professional wrestling has produced. Her timing in the ring was precise. Her character work was layered and committed. As a manager, she had the rare ability to make every act she accompanied feel more credible, more dangerous. She worked alongside Ted DiBiase, Shawn Michaels, and Harlem Heat, elevating each of them, the kind of problem the wrestling industry was structurally ill-equipped to address. The business normalized substance use as a coping mechanism and offered no meaningful resources when it escalated. Reports within the wrestling community indicate that Martel contracted HIV through intravenous drug use during her most difficult years. She was managing the virus and addiction simultaneously, both largely invisible to the public, both largely unaddressed by the industry that had profited from her talent. Sherri Martel died on June 15, 2007, the morning after attending her mother's funeral. The cause was an accidental overdose. She was 49 years old. Number 8. The untold names. The 8th name on this list cannot be stated, not because it doesn't exist, because it belongs to more than one person, more than a dozen, by some accounts, possibly more. A number of professional wrestlers from the late 1980s and 1990s, some of them names immediately recognizable to any fan of that era, contracted HIV. The full scope has never been publicly confirmed. For those still living, those boundaries deserve to be respected. The pattern, however, is documented. Locker rooms with no medical supervision, blood exposure that was choreographed as part of the performance. Steroid use so normalized that shared needles were unremarkable. A corporate structure that deliberately kept performers classified as independent contractors to avoid the obligations that employment status would have imposed. No health insurance, no long-term disability coverage, no retirement provisions, no psychological support. When the industry needed these performers, they were on the road 300 days a year, working through injuries that would sideline professional athletes in any other sport. When they needed the industry, the institutional support was not there. WWE has, in the modern era, introduced a wellness program. Drug testing and safety protocols now exist. That progress is real. The performers of the territorial era, the men and women who built the audience, who created the emotional foundation professional wrestling still stands on, received none of it. Some of them are gone. Some are still living with diagnoses the public has never known about. That record has not been fully accounted for. One, professional wrestling sells a specific fantasy, indestructible figures who bleed on cue and rise before the 3 count. It is a compelling fantasy, and for many people, a formative one. The people inside those characters are not characters. They feel pain the way all people feel pain. They get sick. They make choices, and sometimes desperate choices, under conditions most audiences never see. They gave years of their bodies and their lives to an industry that classified them as independent contractors and moved on when they were no longer useful. The wrestlers in this account, those named and those whose privacy we have chosen to protect, are not defined by their diagnoses. They are defined by what they gave to this business and what this business consistently failed to give in return. Yeah, what is owed to these performers is not complicated. It is honesty. The willingness to examine this industry's history without elision. To state plainly that professional wrestling carried real costs and that those costs were borne almost entirely by the performers themselves. Progress has been made. It should be acknowledged. But the workers of an earlier era, the ones who built everything that followed, deserved protections that were never extended to them. That fact belongs in the record.